Hello, everyone. We're so excited. We have got a fabulous topic today. We have a brand new author. We have Greg Dragan. He and I share the topic of a book. We both have books called Life on Purpose, different routes to how we got to purpose. And I find his to be so fascinating. I found purpose much later in life, and he's a husband for 41 years. He's a father. He's a grandfather. He's a businessman. Just had baby twins and just got over COVID. So we're so glad that you are here with us, Greg. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's glad to be here. And it was funny how we found each other. I just was online and there was Life on Purpose. I'm going, well, that's my stuff. But wait a minute. And
Yeah,
you and I talked and you said, let's do what we can.
that's right. Let's work together, not apart. So, I found purpose, in so many wrong ways. I thank God I ended up there. But you found something at 13 years old, and you come from a really big family, a strong foundation, great parents. But at 13 years old, you discovered a road map to success at 13. So tell us about that
Oh,
moment.
sure. So at 13 years old, I was a little kid, and my dad worked for a company, and they put out these tapes that took 30 days, all 12 of them each, 30 days each. And my dad said, "Would you want to listen to these?" And I said, "Sure, let me do that." And it was really emotional to me because the first tape was about attitude. And even at that stage, I didn't feel like I had the best attitude. I didn't have a lousy attitude. I just sure that I could have done better. And these Nightingale tapes, you can get them online today. They're free. You can go spend 4 hours listening to them, and it'll be the best lesson you ever had in life. But at 13, I took that year and adopted all those things one by one as I went through. And it was, like you said, a roadmap. I mean, it wasn't, it was easy. It was almost shockingly easy how I could put my hands on stuff that I knew was right.
Yeah.
And I had the extra benefit of my parents sitting with me and talking to me about them and saying, what did you learn out of this about attitude? Or what did you learn about goal setting? And it was just this little tool that we could all work with and work together and help, in my case, help me discover how to go about life.
Yeah.
And I was blessed with a good faith at the same time. I was Christian, and a lot of this in there is he doesn't talk a lot about God, but he talks about God things in there that need to happen in anybody's lives to be successful.
Yeah.
And it made a difference for me, and both my spiritual life and my regular growing up, learning how to do life right stuff.
Well, and I want to go back to a couple things that you said. You said your dad brought them home and he presented them to you with a question, not a direction, not a here, listen to this. He said, "How'd you like to listen to this?" And you opted in and said yes. So I think sometimes the way we present things, especially to a 13-year-old, is so
Wow,
important. But
that
yeah, but you said your parents were great listeners, and you guys learned to communicate effectively, and that's the downfall of most families. Oftentimes emotions get high, people get angry, assumptions start to be made, and that's where relationships begin to fail. So what did it look like to communicate effectively with a big family and a bunch of kids around?
Well, first of all, I want to just remind you of something else that you just mentioned about those tapes. I'm really the other kids did do some of those tapes, but I'm the one who really adopted it. And like you said, he asked them all to do it if they wanted to.
Hmm.
And, not everybody did. So I think that's a really valid point that you made, that it took that kind of invite.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't pushed down my throat, and
Right.
I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
But this reflecting listening thing that you're talking about, I'm just it's such a difficult thing to communicate, because when we first start out, we communicate to as a young person to get what we need, and then eventually you grow up, hopefully, and grow out of that, and you begin to communicate to learn from other people and learn about yourself. And a lot of people never transition into that. They stay with the other type of communication, and they never really do learn how to understand other people very well. And my parents were excellent at it. And there were a number of examples happened in my business where my dad actually, reminded me, said, did you ask him why they didn't do what you thought they should do? And I said, well, I think I know. And he said, well, that's a breakdown in communication right there, son. So, it's just such a powerful tool to be able to communicate well and be able to reflective listen. And I was taught that at a very young age, and I used it my entire life, really.
Well, and what do you say to someone in a family and they think, well, we're not great at that? What are the top one or two things that can help a family begin to become great at communication, or in a team situation?
Well, I think it starts with the parents. I mean, the parents have to learn how to do it. And, it's once again, it's a learned thing, and it's not easy to be a good communicator. You have to get some lessons. And I'd say the first thing to do is understand this fact and go get some help if you don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
It's not hard to do. It just requires you to do it. And it's like you and I talking, and we would say to each other, Beth, you have something to say, and I would say back, well, so what you're telling me, Beth, is this is what you're feeling and why you're feeling that. And you then might say, well, that's close, but that isn't exactly how I'm feeling. Mm-hmm. And unless we have that kind of an exchange, I'm never really going to know what you're thinking.
Right. And it's
about
really clarity. Yeah. You're going that extra step to reach clarity and let me make sure I understand. And in a parenting situation or an authoritative situation, the emphasis is on hearing. And I think that's countercultural for for most of us today. It's mostly talking, not listening, right?
Right. Exactly.
Huh. Well, in your book, you have lots of interesting topics in your book, but it's all about these. But I want to go through some specific ones that I think are very relative to most people. Chapter 6 is the surprising power in uprooting. What does that mean?
Okay, so when I was young, we lived in 5 different homes in 10 years. And during that period of time, I mean, it was the very beginning of the book, I write about how it feels to be uprooted like that. It's like, being like a plant being torn out of the ground, and it loses its freshness, it loses its spark. And frankly, that's what happens when you get transferred around a bunch. And I know a lot of people that I grew up with that never left their hometown, never moved from their own home, and that's fine. But for me, it was a little scary at first, but I grew to enjoy it, and I grew to. My parents taught us how to do that, to make this a big experience that was powerful for us, that we could grow, that we didn't have to backtrack when we went through these things. Mm-hmm. So, with that kind of experience, I kept getting better at every move. Yeah. And it helped me be a better communicator. It helped me be give me more confidence. But it was a really challenge having to go through all those things. And the important part was that I had my siblings to do it together with.
Yeah, you had your people.
Right. And like I said, we were taught using those different techniques, the kindness, the sharing, the honesty, all those things. Those were big tools for us, but we needed each other. I remember at times the only person that, I could find to play with would be my siblings. And most of the time, oftentimes it was my brother, because we wanted to do guys things. Mm-hmm. But that's when your family comes to the rescue. And I just think I was blessed to have that kind of an experience with them, to be able to learn life together, to experience how to communicate well, and how to reflect whether or not you're not happy with how some of them are behaving, or not being fair or not being kind. And everybody goes through that. Every child does. And yet it's this great experience to do it in a changing environment like that, because sometimes you you don't get through it very well.
Well, and you find that today, it used to be people lived in their hometown for many years and stayed with a company, but now uprooting is a part of most everyone's life. I mean, I have 5 siblings. We all live in different states. And, that's, the jobs, the life that goes. And, I think that predetermining the attitude up front helps that, and it paves the way, which leads into living a life on purpose is being intentional about everything that you do. And you have rules of life. So you have a set of guidelines, you have a set of things that you filter your decisions through so that you can come up with a firm yes and a firm no. You're not wishy-washy. So how important is it to have your own predetermined set of principles or rules of life?
Oh my, that is such a great question. I can't think of anything else other than God. I mean, everything I did as a young person started there. So I used, of course, I had that to reflect on, but life is complicated. There are so many things you have to do when you get out there that without having some of these tools, you're not really sure. And, granted, there's more tools in this world than 12, and Earl Nightingale isn't the only person that knows how to explain how to be successful in life. But without a path of any sort, you're as far as I'm concerned, are semi-floundering, or maybe even worse, could be failing.
Well, and you use your analogy of the roadmap of life. There's a lot of different directions, and many of them are wrong. You can never find out where you're headed to if you don't have a map.
Right. And so, yeah, you're right. You might have a map. If you don't have a map, you likely end up with the wrong tools in your basket there, and you might be in some big trouble.
Right.
But they were very helpful to me, and the one on ability, or on attitude. It's a simple thing in there. I wrote about it in 3 pages, and here's the basics of it. First of all, people with good attitudes, they have certain characteristics. I mean, they are just part of them. Mm-hmm. They come to life expectant. They think they're going to be able to do whatever they set out to do for the most part. Mm-hmm. That doesn't come naturally by any individual either. You have to be told that you can be successful. You can accomplish what you want. And I remember hearing those words verbatim. And, there were times that I thought, I'm not sure I can do this one. And I was constantly reminded, whether it was them or I reminded myself, that said, I know this works. Mm-hmm. So keep the right attitude. Mm-hmm. And a couple things he said was, approach each day with the attitude that you have to make yourself into this person you want. You have to act, you have to talk, you have to walk like the person you want to be. Mm-hmm. Now, that sounds weird to some people. It sounds like you're forcing something, but it's not. Feelings trigger actions as actions trigger feelings. Mm-hmm. And you can make these things become part of you if you want to. You don't have to. You can do what you choose. Mm-hmm. But you can definitely make a difference in your life. And the other one, the last one lesson for him in that lesson was that you should think about this, about your attitude, and realize that you get out of life what you put into it. Yeah. If you treat people the way you want to be treated, you'll get the same thing back. And his lesson was, for 30 days, go to anybody you come in contact with and treat them the way you should treat that person, as they're the most important person in the world. And he said, you won't believe how your world will change. And
other person's world too.
Their person. Yes, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Both of you change.
Yeah.
And he says, you won't get people to admit it, but frankly, they are the most important person in their life. And that's good. And all these lessons are chock full of things like this that help you just stop for a minute and realize, I gave this to my niece, the book, and she said, Uncle Greg, she I forgot what my attitude was. I I haven't thought about it for so long. And when I read it in your book, I sort of realized that I was missing this whole tool. That I was just walking through life, taking the attitude and taking the results of what was coming. And I had sort of lost the perspective that I could actually be in charge. And that's kind of what this book does.
And you also said that when you did the 30-day challenge, I think this is an important point. It wasn't a quick fix, try this a couple of times and see if it works. So be nice to them, twice or, and then come back. Well, that didn't work. I mean, 30 days is commitment, right? 30 days is commitment. And you can change a lot in consistent commitment over time.
That's right. And habits form in 21 days.
Yeah.
And the habit that formed with me, literally that first day when I said, I'm going to act and talk like the person I want to be, somebody who's got his head on straight and successful. And at 13 years old, I could feel the change.
Yeah.
And, that's just powerful. You're right.
It's so powerful, which leads into the value of work and discipline. So, I learned too that work ethic was so important because I was on my own at a young age. And the discipline required to have these attitudes every day and to choose those words every day and preset, some decisions about who you're going to be. So discipline. I mean, we got a world out there that says, do what you feel like, whatever you think today. And, from day to day, we feel differently, but that is lack of discipline. But when you instill discipline, how does that change who you're truly going to become?
Right. And, I think back when growing up, I knew, my parents knew we were going to go to college. We all knew we were going to go to college. And there's, again, another learned lesson. I mean, you don't just walk up one day and decide you're going to go to college. Someone has to give you that idea. Mm-hmm. Some people figure it out on their own, of course, but it's a lot better if you get a little help urging you on. And we also knew we weren't supposed to we weren't supposed to be in the house when we were after 18 years old. We go off to college, and once you're off to college, great, you won't be coming back here. We love you, but go get your life going. And likewise to people or any of our kids that weren't going to go to college, which wasn't going to probably happen. They said, you have to leave the house and go get an apartment now. You're done here living in this house, so off you go, have fun. We're right there behind you. And so we learned that at a very young age. And what that told me was somehow someone was going to have to pay for that college. And my parents told us how they were going to do it at a very young age and said, we'll help you with this much. At 13 years old, I knew I wasn't going to pay for all of it, but I knew I was going to have to pay for some of it. Mm-hmm. And so the discipline that forced into me, that I could not continue with my day-to-day life through the summers, through school, without having a job to earn that money. Mm-hmm. And it taught me how to plan all the way through, because without having that plan, I wasn't going to be able to earn the amount of money I needed. And it worked. The formula worked, and it worked for all of my siblings. So that kind of discipline just carried on through every part of my life. And it just was just how I thought about work. You have to put it in to get anything out. And I say oftentimes in the book, whatever you sow, so shall you reap. Nightingale says you get exactly what you put in back.
Yeah.
He likes to use an apothecary scale, and he says, whatever you put in the side called service, you get back in rewards. If you don't put a lot of service in, you're just not going to get a lot of reward. Mm-hmm. And learning that at 13, I didn't know how life worked without that kind of logic. And I always thought I had to do my fair share. Yeah. And I think a lot of people sometimes think you don't have to. He said it's like the person sitting in front of a fire saying, give me fire and I'll give you some wood. Mm-hmm. Well, it doesn't work that way. And a lot of people do think that that's how life works.
Yeah. Well, so how has that worked for you as a father? So it's different, you came up and you learned those skills, but now you're a father, a grandfather. Have you been able to pass that down even as generations have changed and culture has changed completely? Has that still continued to work as you train your own children up into the world?
They're all very, it's hard. I'm going to sound like I'm bragging a little bit here. I'm sorry, but my children are all very successful, and they are all strong planners. They are all very disciplined in how they operate. And it's, they all have great jobs, but it's not about that. They all have great families. They all have great attitudes, and they're fun to be around. And now I'm bragging again. I apologize here, but it doesn't always work perfectly. There are times when things are, stressful or what have you. But for the most part, we have tools to help each other back.
Yeah.
And we use the same tools. I mean, they've had the same tools I had for the most part. And they're wonderful, kind, caring adults to each other and to the rest of the world. And I guess I like to think that Diane and I had a little bit to do with that.
And this whole fly by the seat of your pants mentality in the world and don't have a plan. And, we're both Christians and believers, and we know we have a plan and God also has a plan. How do you balance that faith element? Because sometimes your plan doesn't go according to plan. So how do you measure your faith against that when things get diverted a little bit and you have to activate your faith into believing that the bigger plan is at work?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great question. I think it's a lifelong journey with what you just said, solving for that.
Yeah.
There were times in my faith journey that I didn't have that full grip on those feelings that I wish I had all the time.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense that I had these goals, I had these plans, and I know that's good. I know God, if you read Proverbs, it's packed full of, God says, go out and make your plans. You've got to have a plan. You got to do this. Ecclesiastes says not all things are for the good anymore. So it's something you have to wrestle with all the time. But I got better at it, and part of the reason I got better at it is I was growing up. I was discovering my faith. I worked at it really hard. I transitioned from being a Catholic to a Protestant, and it's not because of which direction I went. It was because it took a lot of work to figure out what was the difference and what I wanted out of it. Mm-hmm. And the journey was just wonderful. Yeah. And my wife and I did made the change together. I went basically to her faith, but I understood myself in a way that I hadn't earlier, and it gave me the framework to look at all these tools that I was given for planning and what have you, and be able to pray about it and realize that two things: sometimes they don't work. When they don't work, that's when you really start praying, because most of them I prayed hard enough to get them on the sheet of paper. Mm-hmm. So if they didn't work, what went wrong? And I say in the book, I think God sometimes struggles with us to have a little difficulty, because that's when you do pray, and that's when he gets to hear from you. And a lot of problems were solved by sitting there saying, okay, what's going wrong here? This is just not working. I need help.
Yeah.
And then the other side is they're working, and sometimes being successful is a little scary. Sometimes there's so much happening that you go, wow, I need to make sure I'm not getting too excited here. I got to remain humble. I've got to keep my head straight. I can't get overwhelmed by the idea that this is I'm just a lucky man. Well, no, luck doesn't have much to do with it. God's your man. He's helping you. He's making your place, and I just tried to stay on that course.
So I think this is just so fascinating. So I have two questions. We could talk all day, but we won't. One, we talked a little bit before about the role of the family and faith and fatherhood. Because women are now We know that the family is under attack, and you can just see it in the media. And the traditional family is not what most people think is the go-to anymore. But you've still got fathers trying to lead a family. You've got strong women now as the mothers out working. So what do you say to a daddy, a father, even a grandfather about passing down these legacies of strong manhood to the men in their life?
Well, I think right now you're asking a very modern question here, a very near-in question that I think people would answer that question 5 years ago quite differently than they do right now.
Yes.
I think what's happening, whether it's part of COVID, whether it's part of the George Floyd circumstances, the race issues that are going on, that our country has lost some confidence. Individually, we've lost confidence for solving problems and even discovering new ways to handle things. And I think with all that going on, it's caused us to stop and think about what we're going to do, because if we don't do something different, it's just going to get worse.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. Sometimes I say to my kids, some of the best things that ever happened comes out of things that are crappy.
Yeah.
It's when you learn something, it's when you get a chance to step back and try a different approach, or it makes you actually challenge yourself and say, maybe I've been thinking about this all wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I think where we are as a society right now, I would say trust yourself a little bit more.
Yeah.
You've got all these skills, and you sometimes keep your mouth shut about them.
Yeah.
You're afraid to offend somebody. You're afraid to maybe even offend your children. You're afraid to say the wrong thing. Well, be prayerful. Think about what you're saying. Think about what you want to say and where you're going, and then say it as best you can. But don't sit back and not say anything.
Yeah.
And what I'd say is, if you are going to, it goes back to what I said. If you're going to say something, you better understand what you want to say, because that's where you're going to discover whether or not you have something important to say. Mm-hmm. And if you think it's important and you haven't done the research, and all of a sudden you're stuck because you can't explain it to somebody, that forces you back on another path, which takes you to a spot where you say, I better understand this a lot better, and I better be able to explain this to somebody that I care about, who are my children or my spouse or my siblings. It makes you go in a good spot, and by challenging yourself to try to be important out there, have a voice.
Well, and it's really a consistent theme with you, this productive conversation where you not only speak, but you listen, you reach clarity, you understand one another. And so it boils back down to effective communication over and over and over again, because sometimes tough conversations have to be had. You can't sweep things under the rug in a family, in an office. Sometimes you have to say, whoa, we got to talk about this. I have an opinion on this. Let's kind of talk through this a bit. And you have to, healthy families or healthy teams can have those conversations. Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing to get to the point where you just described, is you have to know yourself. Mm-hmm. And if you don't, I just think people ought to spend a little bit more time trying to think back about who they are and what they're about, mm-hmm. and then make sure they're good with what that is. Yeah. And I know I'm repeating myself here, but it's so important to me that you get to this stage where you actually aren't just a wallflower. That you can't be afraid to talk. You can't be afraid to share. And there's times that I've said some things, and I'm just glad I got it out. Maybe sometimes it isn't perfect, but I'm getting better at it as I go. I like to think. Sometimes I make mistakes, like I said, but I think over time you get better at it.
Well,
better stand up.
And knowing who you are, one of my purpose principles I use in coaching is also knowing who you're not. I'm not a political activist, so I don't engage on political topics very much because that's not where I'm going to spend a ton of time learning. I mean, I know who I'm going to vote for and I know what my values are, but you don't have to talk about everything that's in the news and act like you know everything. Be comfortable with what you don't know, right?
Right. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, I go back to the book where I talk about the principles. They are so important. And as a parent, that's why I wrote this. I wrote it to my kids because I wanted them to understand this.
Yeah.
But I also, like I said, as I got going at it, I kept going, my kids' friends, I hear the same stories over and over. I hear the same, or I understand their stories well. And I was really important for me to get it to this stage where I got to share this and share it with them. And who knows what's going to happen of it. But I'm just glad I got a chance to do it.
Well, we're going to end on that note. So show us the book and tell
Okay.
everybody, so why do people need to have this book? Because everybody wants to live their life on purpose, right?
Right.
So tell us about the cover.
Well, okay. Yep. So the cover, this is a picture from a home in 1964, I think. And we were living in Bismarck, North Dakota. And back then, and you can, this happened all around the whole country. Everybody was coming back from the war, and all these one-story ramblers were built everywhere, identical, garage on the left side or the right side, but basically identical. And in this neighborhood, all of the houses were painted one of those colors you see on that garage door. And one day, my dad got up and he said, this can't be right. This can't be good. So he painted his house charcoal gray. He painted every one of the squares, one of the colors from one of the homes from the neighborhood. So the garage door was full of all those colors, and he thought he was being inclusive, I think. And I write in the book. I mean, they were fun people. They made a lot of friends. No one ever complained about it, but no one else did it either. And he was not afraid to step out and do something different. And that encouraged me. It never left my head, that picture of that garage door the rest of my life. Yeah. And it was a signal to me that you can do what you want, you can be who you want, and you can depend on God to help you get there.
Yeah.
So I took that road, and I always thought of it as a road less traveled because oftentimes I felt like, I thought everybody in the world had a 13-year-old tool like I did to have guidance that was firm in your hands. I mean, our parents teach us everything, right? They teach us all, schools do. It's not like we don't all get a lot of information, but it was a tool that I could put my hands on. And I just knew exactly, confidently, that my parents said, these are good tools, Greg. Just you follow these, you're going to be fine in this life.
Yeah, and purpose is intention. I mean, it's so much better to have an intentional path and think about the results of your decisions as opposed to just living the chaos of the bad ones. I mean, it's so much easier to decide ahead of time what path you're going to take than try to make up for the wrong path that you did. And I did everything backwards than you did. My family was a big old mess. I was on my own very early. And that's why I find it's so fascinating. I love hearing stories like yours because it's so encouraging to know that parents can have an incredible amount of influence over their kids when they have a really good plan of what that influence is going to look like. And they did.
And they did. And it also bodes well for the rest of us that we can adopt these things anytime you want. You can figure them out yourselves, which you did. And I think you became just an extraordinarily successful person with all these principles in your basket. Somehow or another, you got them.
Yeah.
And I
just had to find them in the crazy way. So where can people find this book?
Yeah, so you can go to bookbaby.com.
Bookbaby.com.
Right.
Okay.
And it's at store.bookbaby.com is even a more direct way to order the book. You can order it. It takes a little bit longer on Amazon. They just look for the book. It may say it's available or it may not be available. It depends on stock and all that stuff. But this is really my first interview, Beth, and I thank you for that. And I will tell you that, it's, self-publishing is a very interesting road, and I'm glad I did it. It's been fun. I didn't know how much work to put in it at the end, but or once I got it out and running, and now I'm learning some of those things, and we'll see where it goes. And I just am honored to have the chance to sit down with you, and I did enjoy your one yesterday, by the way, with Ben Jones and Jessica.
Yeah.
What a great story about heroes and Peace River, that movie. That's going to be great.
That is going to be great. And the thing you and I do have in common is we both had a book in us for 20 years. It took us 20 years to get it out. So I'm very excited about yours. We'll have to come back and talk some more later, but thank you for joining us. I'm so congratulations on the book and the twins and all the family stuff that's going on. And I appreciate you joining us and sharing your story.
Well, thank you, Beth. And I'm glad to do it and love to come back.
Okay, we'll do it. We definitely will. We'll keep in touch.
See ya. Bye.
All right, have a great one.
You too.